Hi, and welcome to another edition of PTP's Infinite Innovation Interview Series. Today we're going to be talking with Alex Smith, CloudOps Engineer for PTP. Thanks for joining us, Alex.
Thanks for having me, Gary. It's great to be here.
So our conversation with Alex is going to focus on the relevant questions of today, which is, how can users in various locations securely connect to AWS? Alex, can you briefly explain the challenge here?
Administrators who are new to working with AWS will get caught up by this idea of the security group, which blocks access from certain IP addresses. And if your users are moving around, they might ask you to make security group exceptions for every IP address of every place that they might be. That's a lot of overhead, and IP addresses change, and it gets very impractical. So it's a lot different challenge to just restricting access to a server that's in an office to users that are in an office and the location never changes.
So what are some questions we need to ask our customer, or they need to ask themselves, looking to identify the best solution for them?
Right. Well, AWS presents different options depending on your needs, right? You might be looking for something that's quick and dirty and easy to do. Or you might be looking for a solution that is more robust and more secure and more permanent in nature. You might have one solution for if users need access to certain applications, but they don't care about accessing the servers themselves. Or you might have an IT staff that needs to be able to make changes to certain settings on the servers or needs to make updates on the servers, but they don't actually need to log into the servers directly themselves. Some situations it can seem like you have like a triangle of easy, secure, and functional, and you can only pick two. But really, with some foresight and some planning, AWS has solutions that can meet all three of those needs at the same time.
That makes sense. And it's clear, like with a lot of technology solutions, specific solutions need to be adapted to unique customer needs. Alex, can you run through some solution options and the pros and cons that should be considered?
So the simplest option is going to be to make exceptions for individual IP addresses in the security groups for whichever AWS resources you're restricting access to. So this might be suitable if you've got one user who just needs to get into something quickly from their house. You can add in their IP address into the security group. But this is not scalable. If you've got a lot of resources and a lot of users, if you've got 50 users, you don't want to be making security group changes for all 50 of their IP addresses, especially if you've got resources that are in different security groups, maybe accessible to different groups of users. You'd have to make all of those changes on all of the resources. On top of that, the changes won't even be a permanent fix because users' IP addresses can change because of DHCP. So again, this is the quick and dirty solution. You really don't want to try and make this an enterprise level solution to any of your problems. A sort of variant on that idea, and one that we still see fairly often, would be to create a jump box or Bastion host. You just would change the security group rules on the group for that host. Then for your AWS resources, you make it so that those are only accessible from the Bastion host. So that's more secure, right? The resources then are not open to any part of the world. They're only open to the Bastion host. You make all your changes on the group for the Bastion host. That might be okay if you're a small business or if you only have a few users. That wouldn't be such a bad option. But you still run into the same problem as if you were making security group changes to every resource. You're just kind of moving the problem to the Bastion host. It's still going to cause you problems if you have a large workforce or you have to try and do this all the time. Probably the most versatile and scalable option for user access to AWS would be to set up the AWS client VPN. With this solution, you have an endpoint that's located in your AWS environment, and your users install the AWS VPN client on their workstations. With this option, your AWS resources don't have to be publicly accessible at all. And you can further secure this by having it require MFA for your users to connect. This is easy to scale, but it's more complex to set up. You do have to configure this, and you'll need a user management solution. You'll have to set up Active Directory. You can integrate your own directory service, or you can set up the AWS managed Active Directory for user management once you have that set up, you can manage your users with passwords, and you can lock them out if they quit or you don't want them to access things. And furthermore, you can even set up different groups with the client VPN so that some VPN users can access these servers, some VPN users can access this service here. So it's a versatile solution, but it's not easy. You want a real IT administrator to set this up. It's not something an amateur should be trying to do. You might also have a situation where your users need to access certain applications, but they don't care about accessing the servers themselves. What they need to do is not specific to being on a server. So for a situation like that, you might look at AWS Workspaces. This is a desktop as a service solution where you, the administrator, configure what the users get on their virtual desktop. You put the applications on there that you think they're going to need. Then the users get the AWS Workspaces client and install it on whatever computer they have access to. They just double click on that and the virtual desktop appears. They do all their work in that. They close it when they're finished, and that's it. They can use that from any PC. You can stop issuing laptops and take that factor out of your consideration. It's very convenient. The drawbacks are it can be kind of expensive. Some people say the cost is pretty high. And you don't have all the same functionality as a server. You don't have all the compute capacity that a server might offer. But if you don't need those things, then the Workspaces client, that can be a good solution too. Another option that exists that's kind of less known is the AWS EC2 Systems Manager. This is something that's suitable for use by your IT staff, right? With this, users can log into the management console and make changes to servers, run updates, or install new software from the management console. This takes the network aspect of access right out. No more managing IP addresses or access from certain locations. Instead, it's as secure as your management console is. So if you already have IAM users and roles and MFA protection for that, you can take advantage of that, and your users or staff can access the servers to make changes, but they're not really accessing the server themselves directly. So again, EC2 Systems Manager is a good tool for maybe an MSP. The downside of that is that it only works if the Systems Manager agent is installed on the servers. So if you perhaps don't have complete access to servers to get that installed, that's a pitfall, right? It won't work for a use case like that. And it's also not suitable if, for whatever reason, you don't want your users accessing your management console. Sometimes that might be the case, and so this option doesn't work good.
That's great information, Alex. Really appreciate you taking the time to share with us.
No problem, Gary. Happy to do it. Hopefully that helped clear some things up.
We appreciate you watching this edition of PTP's Infinite Innovation Interview series. Check us out on YouTube or ptp.cloud for more information.